Hello everyone, I'm Janine Kakmar with PHTV Channel 4 Palos Heights, and we're back with our show all about books. On the show, as you know, we talk about books and writing, authors, and then we have a special guest that we get to visit with. And today we have our special guest is author Dan Burns. He's here to talk about his new book, A Fine Line. He's also going to talk about a little bit about your other parts of your writing life, which include his short story collection, one of which has been turned into a film. You can talk about his screenwriting and stage writing and poetry. So we have a little bit of everything to talk about, so I'm looking forward to hearing more. But before we get to visit with our guest, we're going to talk about books. And since we're in the thick of the award season in Hollywood, we're going to talk about the books whose films have been nominated for Oscars. And also maybe about some of the other books that are coming out into film this year as well. Our first book that's been turned to a film is Mudbound, and by award-winning author Hillary Jordan. And this book tells the story of two men of different race who fought together in World War II. They were brothers in arms. But when they return home to a rural farm in rural Mississippi, they have to deal with the prejudice of the Jim Crow South and of readjusting to life after war. The film's been nominated for 4 Academy Awards. The first one is Best Supporting Actress for Mary J. Blige, for Best Adapted Screenplay by Dee Rees and Virgil Williams, Best Cinematography for Rachel Morrison, and the Best Achievement in Music for Original Song for Mighty River. The movie stars Garrett Hudlin, Carey Mulligan, Jason Clarke, and is directed by Dee Rees. Our next book to film is also nominated for 4 Academy Awards. The book is titled Call Me By Your Name by author Andre Aciman. And the book came out in 2007, and it tells the story of a sudden and powerful romance between a young adolescent boy and a summer guest at his parents' house in the Italian Riviera. The 4 Oscars that it's nominated for are Best Actor for Timothée Chalamet, who also was nominated for Best Actor for a Golden Globe. Best Adapted Screenplay. It's nominated for Best Movie of the Year, and also Best Achievement in Music, Original Song, The Mystery of Love. Our next book to film is Molly's Game, written by Molly Bloom, and it tells the story of her true story about her life as an Olympic skier, and also about her life as a woman who ran a world's most exclusive high-stakes poker game, which also made her a target of the FBI. The film stars Jessica Chastain and Idris Elba as her lawyer, and Aaron Sorkin is the director, and he also won an Oscar nomination for his writing of the Best Adapted Screenplay. And then another book to film is All the Money in the World. It's a book written by John Pearson, who wrote the true story about the kidnapping of the 16-year-old grandson of, his name is Paul Getty. He's the grandson of J. Paul Getty, which of course is one of the richest men of the world at this time. But this grandfather refused to pay the ransom, so it was up to his mother, Gail, to rescue her son. Now, the book actually goes into more detail about the dysfunctions in the Getty family, and it gets very some details are kind of disturbing and interesting. But the movie actually is directed by Ridley Scott and stars Michelle Williams, Mark Wahlberg, and Christopher Plummer plays J. Paul Getty, and he actually won a nomination for his as a Best Supporting Actor in this film. And our final book to film for an Oscar nomination is The Disaster Artist, and this was a book written by Greg Sestero and Tom Bissell, and is another true story based on the life of actor Greg Sestero when he meets Tommy Wiseau in an acting class, and they go to Hollywood to make their dreams come true. James Franco is the director of this film. He also stars in the film, and he actually won a Best Actor for Golden Globe for his role in this film. The movie is nominated for an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. So we'll have to wait to March 4th when the Academy Awards winners are announced, and we'll have to see if any of these books are winners. But for those of you who are interested at the library, we're running a Academy Award contest right now. If you go in, you can pick up a ballot, make your predictions, and drop them off back by March 4th, and you get you're entered into a raffle to win a night out at the movies basket. It's just for fun. You get bragging rights, whoever gets the most right correctly. But there are also many other books coming out into film in 2018. As we speak, right now we have A Wrinkle in Time is coming out, Ready Player One. I know a lot of people are waiting for that one to come out. We also have another one coming out later in the year, The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, which was actually a book that was nominated for a Booker Prize. And it's a thoroughly creepy Gothic novel that takes place in 1947 English countryside. It's about when a young country doctor, who's played by Domhnall Gleeson, is called in to care for a patient at Hundred Hall, which is a declining estate where his mother once worked when he was a young boy. That film is directed by Lenny Abramson, who also directed the film Room, which was another book turned to film, which won many awards when it came out also. It co-stars Ruth Wilson, Charlotte Rampling, so it's got a great cast. So that looks like a good one to look forward to towards in August. Another book to film is Crazy Rich Asians, which this was a best-selling, outrageously funny debut novel by Kevin Kwan. It's about 3 super rich pedigreed Chinese families and the gossip and backbiting and scheming that goes on when they are at a family wedding. And that's coming out later in the year as well. But one of my favorite books, Where'd You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple, is coming out in May. And I can't wait because it's starring Cate Blanchett. She portrays the anxiety-ridden mother who disappears and everybody is trying to find her. It's also directed by Richard Linklater, who directed the film Boyhood last year, I believe. So we've got a good cast, we have a good director. I hope they don't mess this one up because, you know, you never know when they turn a book to film, is it going to be any good? You know, that's the big question. Another book to film that's just coming out shortly is 12 Strong, and that's based on the book Horse Soldiers by Doug Stanton. And this is a true story of the first Special Forces team that was deployed in Afghanistan after 9/11. And they must work with an Afghan warlord to take down the Taliban. The book was really well reviewed, and I've heard some good things about the movie as well. I guess they did a pretty close rendition of the book, so that should be interesting. It stars Chris Hemsworth and Michael Shannon, who's also a Chicago actor originally. Annihilation is another award-winning book that's been turned into a film coming out very shortly by Jeff Vandermeer. And it's about a biologist who signs up for a dangerous secret expedition and they find out the laws of nature don't apply. So some very strange things start to happen on this secret expedition. The film stars Natalie Portman in a very different film, role that we normally see her in. Jennifer Jason Leigh and Oscar Isaac. Oscar Isaac was in another film that this director, Alex Garland, directed a couple of years ago, Ex Machina. Very stylistic thriller. It's a great film, so I'm kind of excited to see what this director does with this book. And this book is actually also being the focus of a discussion, the sci-fi book discussion from the library on Wednesday, the 21st, February 21st at 7 p.m. The discussion is actually held in Joe Daniels, so you can go to the bar and have the discussion there. And anybody who attends this discussion can enter a drawing for 2 movie tickets to go see the film, which comes out 2 days later on February 23rd. So check that out if you wish. And stay tuned for these and other books that are coming out to film. And keep in mind that the library runs a book and film series every month. On the 3rd Thursday of the month at 2 o'clock, we show a film based on a book, and we have a discussion about it. We also raffle off a paperback copy of the book, too. And so it's kind of fun. This month, in February 15th, actually, at 2 o'clock, we're going to be showing the film The Lost City of Z, based on the true story David Grand wrote about some British explorers in the Amazon. So, you know, what can go wrong with that, right? That was back in the 20s, I think. So that's kind of an exciting movie. We also have coming up The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls, which was an incredible book. And they did a great job with the movie as well. If you haven't read that, you should read it. It's an incredible story. Stronger, that's a story about one of the survivors of the Boston Marathon bombing. Very, very good story, true life story. And of course, Dunkirk, which is coming up in May, we'll be showing. So you can visit the library's website at PalosHeightsLibrary.org to find out all the other details of those shows and other events that we have. But in the meantime, we are done talking about books and we get to visit with our guest, Dan Burns. So Dan, thank you so much for waiting patiently. And thanks for coming out On this day that we're filming, we had a lot of snow, and so Dan was a real trooper coming out this morning. So thanks again for that.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Dan has got an interesting biography, and I'm going to make sure I get all the details right. So I'm going to read a little bit of it. He's the author of the Chicago Mystery, as we mentioned, A Fine Line, which we'll be talking about in detail. He also wrote a contemporary family drama called Recall to Life. He wrote a short story collection called No Turning Back. And one of his short stories, Out of Touch, has been recently produced as a short film. So he has a book that's gone to film as well. So we want to talk about that. And he also writes poetry and stories for the stage and screen. And his new full-length stage play, Grace, is in development for a forthcoming stage production. So one of my first questions for you, Dan, is how do you do all of that? How did you get started with this? How did you... That's a lot to carry around.
It is, and it's just a whole lot of fun, I have to tell you. I got started officially and permanently full-time about 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I had a past life. I spent 25 years in the IT industry.
Okay.
And I had the opportunity to step away from that and write and teach full-time.
Wonderful.
So I've spent the last 10 years just delving into all of these projects, getting these ideas out of my head because they have to come out.
Right.
And just trying all the different venues for getting stories out to the public.
So yeah, what came out first? Was it the novels? Were you writing poetry? How did that happen?
You know, the shorter forms have always been my favorite over the years, and that's really where I started. So lots of short stories to kind of get my practice in form and to polish up my writing. And so short stories and poetry, and that led to other things, and that's typically how it works with me. I'll have an idea and I'll start in a shorter form, and if I like it, then it doesn't leave me alone, and I have to explore it further. So you know, a short story can turn into a screenplay, which can then turn into a novel, and it's a
Is that a
building
natural
process.
progression for you, for a typical short story for you, or do they ever just go like from a short story to a novel, or depends on the character or the story, or?
It kind of depends. You know, with respect to the novels, my fear has always been, wouldn't it be tough to spend 2 years of your life only to find out that the story wasn't any good? And so I like to kind of flesh out the ideas in shorter forms first, and doing some short stories to see if the characters make sense. You can then go into a screenplay, which is about 100 pages of effort, which makes for great film. And if you still like it, like I did with A Fine Line, that was a screenplay first.
Oh, really?
Then I developed further into a novel. So I did the film to book. I did the
something different, right?
Did the opposite.
Well, we'll have to do a show on that one, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So, but is that a different type of writing when you write for screen? Are you thinking of the scenes and the characters differently than you are if you were just writing a novel? You know,
I'm a very visual writer.
Okay.
You know, I have to see it before I can write it. So whether it's a screenplay or a short story or a novel, I'm picturing it in my head as I'm writing it. So it's not different from that standpoint.
Okay.
Screenplays are very different in that it's really just the dialogue. It's the characters and what they're saying.
Really?
Very little additional information aside from some general scene descriptions. Very little is included.
Imagine the stage writing is like that as well. Is that?
It is
for the stage.
It is, and the idea there is, you know, whoever directs it wants to kind of take it as their own. So they're just concerned about the characters and what they're saying, and which is cool. I love writing dialogue, and I think if I can, you know, put characters into a scene and they can say things that are interesting and engaging and intelligent, then I can always fill in the descriptions and the additional detail.
Yeah. So let's talk about your new book before we get off track, because I can talk about writing all day long. But it's your newest mystery novel, and it's set in Chicago, and it's the story of a struggling writer with a secret government past who's hired to investigate a cold murder case involving a powerful political family. The novel also introduces a new character, Sebastian Drake, and this is not the first time you've used Sebastian Drake, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, tell us a little bit about him.
It's pretty interesting. You know, as a writer, I'll take an idea however it comes. And so many years back, my daughter was in high school. She came home one day, and she said, "Dad, I was talking to my friend Spencer, and he asked what you did for a living." And, she told him I was a writer, and he's like, "I don't think so. He looks like a spy." And I thought that was so bizarre, but you know, I don't know where that came from. I'm not a spy.
Well, you kind of look like one, Dan. You know. I don't know.
I just can't talk about it.
Okay, all right.
But I'm not in. But that idea kind of stuck with me, and you know, I'm not a spy, and I don't have any secret government past. But wouldn't it be cool if I did? And so a couple of weeks later, I created this character, Sebastian Drake, and I needed to figure out, you know, who he was and could he be this person. Stuck him in a coffee shop. He happened to run into his old friend from grade school, and I wrote this short story called Letting Go. And through that process, I was able to learn about him and his past and where he is today. And so that was the start, and some other short stories ensued, and next thing I knew, I'm writing a screenplay for a feature film with Drake in the lead character. And
wow.
It's this story, A Fine Line.
Okay.
And again, it's a building process. I finished that project. I loved it. It did very well on kind of the screenplay festival circuit, and it just wouldn't leave me alone. So I developed further as a novel, and as I said, he's a series character. He'll likely be back.
So yes, he's not going to leave you alone.
He will not leave me alone.
Yeah. But I know we get a lot of people who ask, you know, for writers, you know, how do you create these characters? I know you talked a little bit about Sebastian, but your other characters or your other ideas, you know, where do those come from? Or
you know, sometimes they come from very specific places, like an experience or somebody I meet, and sometimes I'm not sure I can tell you. You know, it's
a mystery, huh?
It's a mystery. It's you know, put two people in a room and see what they have to say and see how that character develops. It's one of the most interesting and fun aspects of writing, because sometimes these characters, they build themselves and take off on their own.
You know, you said you've been doing this for 10 years full time, but you've always been writing, you said. Is that process ever gotten any easier, the process of, you know, discovery, or is it constantly, you know, you're finding yourself, well, I didn't expect this to happen this way or anything?
You know, the ideas still come endlessly, which is cool.
That's good.
As long as
That's
they keep coming, and I remember to write them down. If I don't write them down, they can be lost forever. So writing them down is key. Ideas are still coming. The writing process is as hard as ever.
Is it?
It's a very solitary endeavor, and you have to sit down and do your work.
Yeah, tell us about it. You know, people, you hear a lot about, you know, writers who have different, you know, routines that they get into, and even, you know, if you saw the film Shakespeare in Love, how he would have Shakespeare where they do little certain things at the desk before he'd sit down. I mean, how does that work for you? What does your schedule look like, or a daily life, a day in the life of a writer for you?
Okay, you know, I cannot write at home. It's
really?
Impossible. I am too distracted by life, and so I have a small office downtown LaGrange.
Do you?
A little office above a storefront, and it's a place for me to go where I'm completely disconnected, and I go there and I sit down and I do my work. I write, and sometimes you know, I'll finish with my writing goal for the day in a couple hours. Sometimes it takes all day. What is
your writing goal?
You know, try and do.
Does that change it, or?
You know, if I could get a good 500 words every single day, I think that's a pretty good accomplishment. Oftentimes it's more, once I get going, it seems to kind of take off on its own. But I go there every single day. I write until I'm done. I read a lot. I do research for other projects.
Okay.
And then I head out. But interestingly enough, the ideas and the projects I'm working on, they never leave me. So I'm always thinking about them during the day. I'm thinking about them when I'm sleeping. I wake up and I have a new idea for a character or a story, and so every day is different, and it's a beautiful thing.
It's kind of, I mean, it's like your training is, you know, and you talk about, you know, it is like athletes have to train, they have to, you know, work out every day, the same muscles, you know, develop muscle and strength. That's kind of, you know, the schedule of being there at a certain time, and, you know, you're training the mind or the brain or whatever, if you can do that kind of thing. But that's funny that you said that you can't write at home. I just saw William Kent Kruger, author, big author. He writes the Cork O'Connor series, but he's also has some independent books. He was talking at Anderson's in Naperville a while ago, and he can't write at home either. He says, and it was kind of funny because he goes, I just sit down, and I'm getting all ready to go, and I hear the heater didn't go on. Was that the water heater? Did the water heater not click on? You know, all these little sounds that start to, like, you know, distract him. Well, why isn't it running? Oh my gosh, am I going to have to go fix this thing now? You know, and we just had it. You know, so the whole thing of life starts to seep in, and so he actually goes to a coffee shop. He says down the street from him, where they leave him alone. They know him. He's up in Minnesota, and he has his coffee, and he just sits and he writes, and he can tune the other outside noise out. You know,
that's a pretty good skill.
Yeah,
in and
but
of itself.
but it's funny. He said he couldn't do that at home either. So yeah. I guess you're not the only one, right? But you mentioned writing being a solitary life, and you mentioned a little bit early in our conversation that you're a member of the Chicago Writers Association. Right. Talk about a little bit about that, and how does that work with you?
You know, it's a fantastic organization. The Chicago Writers Association is, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary.
Wonderful.
And I first joined to have, you know, a place to go to talk to other writers about the experience. And also because, you know, at the time I had a new book coming out, and they had a tent at Printers Row Lit Fest.
Okay.
And I always thought, wouldn't it be great to be an author at the Lit Fest?
Sure.
So I signed up. I was able to participate with the group at their tent, and kind of the rest is history. I'm a member of the board, and you know, it's fantastic. We have over 750 members.
What do you need to do to be a member, or how does that work?
Go to the website. It's chicagowrites.org. Membership is $25 a year. It's the best money that you'll ever invest in your writing career, and it provides all sorts of fantastic benefits, from a book review service if you have a new book coming out,
nice.
Free of charge, all sorts of educational events, all sorts of online and in-person activities for bringing writers together.
Wow.
It's just awesome. And again, as writers, we have to, you know, we have to be by ourselves to get the work done.
Right.
But then it's important that we get out there and still experience life and share with other writers what we're going through. And I think the thing I love the best is that no matter where I'm at in the process, I always know that somebody has gone through it before.
Right.
Right. I'm not blazing a trail that on my own. I know I can always talk to somebody.
That's nice. That's a nice reassuring thing to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have to be in Chicago to be in the Chicago Writers Association? Is there, or you have to live in can you live in the suburbs? Do you have to be in the city proper?
You can live anywhere.
Wow.
We have members from all over the world. Most people are in Chicago or the surrounding suburban areas, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Most of our benefits are accessible virtually or online, so it doesn't matter where you're located.
Wonderful. You also talked about, you were recently at the Palos Heights Library doing as a speaker for one of the book discussion groups. The Women's Club was there. You mentioned how you like to go out and get feedback from the book clubs and that. Is that something you do a lot?
I do. It's an awful lot of fun to get out and talk with people who have read the book. It is a mutually beneficial situation. The readers love to talk to the writer about, how'd you come up with that idea, or, you know, tell me about this aspect of the story. And as a writer, you know, I love to hear how my story impacts the readers and what they get or what they're concerned about. That feedback is very helpful to me as a writer. And plus, we just have a great time. It's fun talking books, and I like the opportunity when I've read a book, if I can talk to the author. I love that experience. And so yeah, I do it quite a bit. And for any book club members out there that might be interested, you can feel free to go to my website. And
what is your website?
It's danburnsauthor.com.
Okay.
And under the events tab is information about the book club. And it's awesome. The process is simple. I send out books before the meeting at a discounted price. The folks read the book, I show up as their schedule permits, and we have a great discussion.
Very good.
Yeah.
You talked about some of your other things that you wrote. Your No Turning Back, which is your collection of short stories, and that was the one that went to film, right? So, and I've always wondered, how does the author let go of something that you've created and turn it over to somebody else to do something else with it? So, how was that experience for you?
It was exceptional.
Really?
A little bit scary, quite interesting, but just a fantastic experience. As I mentioned before, when I write visually, so I like to think my stories are very visual as well. And after the book came out, a friend of mine from the old neighborhood, I hadn't talked to him in 25 years, called me up and said, I read your book and we have to make some films. He's a filmmaker.
Oh my gosh.
And,
did you know that he was in film?
I did.
Okay.
But never thought to talk with him about it.
Right.
And so he said, I love these 3 stories. Can you write the screenplays? Which I did. And the first one we thought that would make sense is Out of Touch.
Okay.
And it's about a gentleman who comes back from Paris for his high school reunion, hoping to grab the love of his life, but things don't quite work out as they may want to. But it was so cool. I had to let him take it and run with it. But to see the effort of these actors who put in the time to bring these characters to life. I was invited to stand on the periphery and watch.
Really?
I had no say whatsoever.
Did you say, hey, wait a minute, no, stop, no?
No, that wasn't...
Did you want to?
I really didn't.
No, okay.
Once it took off, it was so incredible to see, again, these paper characters on the page come to life. And anyway, it's a great short film. It's 15 minutes in length. It is available on my website and my YouTube channel, which is Dan Burns Author, and it's called Out of Touch. And read the story, watch the film, let me know what you think.
Was it made in Chicago then?
It was.
Yeah, we've got a good film industry here in Chicago.
We do.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Okay, so what's next after this one? What can we expect from Sebastian Drake?
As we talked about before, he's not going to leave me alone.
Yeah.
So we're currently working on the next installment. It's called A Perfect Circle.
Right. Don't tell too much. I don't want you to lose your inspiration.
No, it's I have the title.
Okay, great.
And the rest is developing as we speak.
Ooh,
so I'm working on that and hope to have that out sometime next year. And as you mentioned, one of the most exciting things that I've been working on is a stage play. It's called Grace.
Right. Yes.
I started it as a poem.
Really?
This idea, spit it out as a poem, wouldn't leave me alone, became a short story. And then I see a lot of theater, and I just saw that story playing out on the stage. And
why the stage and not film? I mean, how did that work? Or could they both be the same? Or
film has to be much more visual.
Okay.
In terms of location and action, and the stage not so much. It's more about, again, the characters and what they were saying. So this story just fit that medium better.
Okay.
And so I wrote the play and worked with a couple of nationally recognized playwrights to review it and revise it, and had a great staged reading at Chicago Dramatists over the summer.
Wow.
Actors and a director, again, bringing it to life. So the next step is producing it as a play on the stage. So.
And that's coming up?
Working on it
As
soon as we can possibly.
So we want to keep
make it
tabs
happen.
on that. So we can go to your website and find out the progress of things, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Again, it's danburnsauthor.com.
Right. And then, so you talked about this book has come out in audio, correct?
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it came out in June in hardcover and ebook, and then came out in November as an audiobook. And for all of you audiobook lovers,
that's me.
George Guidall?
Yes. Well, not personally, but
you've likely
heard his voice. Yes.
You've likely heard his voice. And when I was thinking about who to select as a narrator, I figured let's pull out all the stops and get the best narrator in the world. And
that is huge for an audiobook.
It is.
We talked about this before on the show, how it can make or break a book.
And he's fantastic. He's Hall of Fame, the most prolific narrator in the world.
Wow.
And he did a fantastic job. Brought these characters to life in a way that I could not have imagined. So for all of you audiobook lovers out there, have at it.
There's quite a
and
few
let me know what
actually.
you think.
Audiobooks have actually, industry-wise, I mean, you're probably aware of this, have really dramatically increased, especially in the last couple of years, digitally have increased in use more so than ebooks. So
It's an exciting development.
yeah, it
It
is.
is.
So, well, we can find your books in the bookstores everywhere.
Absolutely. Everywhere books are sold, great prices through my website.
Okay.
I try and beat out the local bookstores and the national chains as well.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
available
Well,
everywhere.
all right. So take note of that, folks. You know where to find Dan Burns. We wish you all the best with all your writing endeavors. Thank you so much for coming out here.
Well, thank you for having
Thank
me.
you all for watching today. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.